My name is Ellie Mineral, and every part of who I am reflects the life I've lived. For years, I dreamed of giving my daughter a home she could call her own, a place where laughter echoed through the halls and every corner held warmth and love. When I gifted Clara the villa, it wasn't for praise or gratitude, just a mother's love. But love, it seems, wasn't enough. One day, I arrived for a visit and was met not with Clara's welcoming smile, but the commanding tone of her mother-in-law. "We've decided to make some changes. You don't mind, do you?" Just like that, everything I had given to Clara was claimed by another family. There was no consultation, no respect, just a swift occupation of what wasn't theirs, leaving Clara voiceless and me seething with disbelief. I couldn't stand by any longer. The confrontation came during a crowded dinner, tension simmering beneath every word. James's aunt gestured around the table, her voice dripping with entitlement. "This villa is perfect for all of us. It really feels like home now." But I had my reply ready, one line, sharp and unyielding, that brought the entire room to silence and set everything in motion. This story was about to change. No more passivity, no more unspoken boundaries. This gift was about to be reclaimed. Drop your city below, we want to see how far this story has reached. At 62, I carry myself with the quiet confidence of someone who has weathered storms and emerged stronger. I'm not one to raise my voice, but when I speak, it's with intention and conviction. I've learned that life rewards those who know their worth and stand by it unapologetically. I balance resilience with a soft, warmth kind, but never naive. I've given so much to those I love, but I've also learned to draw a line when my generosity is taken for granted. My life is my own, and even now, I'm embracing it with a renewed sense of purpose. Whether it's tending to my garden, exploring new interests like piano, or simply enjoying the beauty of the world, I live with intention. My journey isn't defined by what's behind, me's shaped by what I choose to build ahead. As Mrs. Miller strutted through the house like she was appraising her personal kingdom, my temper simmered dangerously close to boiling. It wasn't just her entitled tone or the blatant disregard for politeness, it was the audacity to disrespect Natalie in the very home meant to symbolize her new beginning. I stood motionless for a moment, watching as she pushed open the master bedroom door with a look of utter disdain, Curtis trailing behind her like a scolded puppy. "Oh, no, no, no," Mrs. Miller declared, turning to her son. "This room won't do for us. Look at it, too small for all our luggage, and that window barely lets in enough light. Curtis, go tell Natalie she'll need to give up the master suite." My mouth fell open, the sheer nerve of her words hitting me like a slap. Before I could respond, Natalie stepped forward, her voice quiet but pleading. "Mrs. Miller, the master bedroom is ours. You're welcome to use the guest room, it's spacious, and the view of the garden is lovely." Mrs. Miller's expression hardened, and she let out an exaggerated sigh, as though Natalie's words were a personal affront. "Natalie, sweetheart, I thought you'd be more accommodating. After all, we're family now. Surely you wouldn't want Curtis's parents cramped in some tiny guest room." Her words hung in the air, sharp and manipulative, and I could see the flicker of doubt in Natalie's eyes. But before she could fold under the pressure, I stepped in. "Mrs. Miller," I said, my voice calm but firm, "perhaps you misunderstand. This house was a gift to Natalie. She and Curtis are the homeowners here. While we're grateful for your presence, it's important to respect their space." Her head whipped toward me, her lips curling into a tight, almost mocking smile. "Oh, Ellie," she said, dripping faux sweetness, "you must understand, this isn't just about space. It's about ensuring everyone feels comfortable. And besides, isn't it our right as family to have a say in these things?" Her nerve was astounding. I met her gaze evenly, my voice unwavering. "Family doesn't claim what isn't theirs, Mrs. Miller. And let me remind you, this isn't just about comfort, it's about boundaries, and they need to be respected." She opened her mouth to argue, but Curtis's father interrupted, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Come on, dear," he said, trying to placate her. "Let's not make a fuss, the guest room will be fine." But Mrs. Miller wasn't done. She muttered something under her breath about city folk and their pretentious ways, before storming down the hall, Curtis scrambling after her. Natalie turned to me, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. I didn't know how to handle that. I placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently. "You don't have to handle it alone, sweetheart, but you need to stand your ground. This is your home, and no one has the right to make you feel like a guest in it." She nodded, her resolve visibly strengthening. I could only hope she would carry that strength into the battles I knew were yet to come. The escalation. It didn't take long for the tension to boil over. Over the next few days, the Millers treated the villa like their personal domain, rearranging furniture without permission, stockpiling food in the pantry like doomsday preppers, and hosting impromptu family gatherings without so much as notifying Natalie or Curtis. One evening, as I arrived to drop off some fresh-baked bread, I walked into chaos. The dining table was overflowing with plates of food, most of which looked untouched. A group of Curtis's relatives lounged in the living room, laughing loudly, their shoes kicked off and scattered across the carpet. Natalie stood near the kitchen, holding a plate but looking utterly lost amidst the noise. I approached her, lowering my voice. "Natalie, what's going on here?" She gave me a weak smile, her voice barely audible. "They wanted to have a family dinner. Curtis said it was fine." My jaw tightened. "And did Curtis bother to ask if you were fine with it?" She looked away, not answering, and I felt a pang of anger not just at the Millers, but at Curtis himself. How could he stand by while his family walked all over my daughter? I didn't wait for permission. Marching into the living room, I clapped my hands loudly, commanding everyone's attention. "Excuse me," I said, my voice firm. "I believe there's been some confusion. This isn't a public venue, it's Natalie and Curtis's home. If you'd like to host gatherings, I suggest you consult them first." The room fell silent, every pair of eyes on me. Mrs. Miller stood abruptly, her face flushed with anger. "Ellie, you're being ridiculous. We're family, there's no need for such formality." I smiled coldly. "Family respects boundaries, Mrs. Miller. This isn't about formality, it's about courtesy. And frankly, it's in short supply around here." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Curtis finally broke the silence, his voice timid. "Mom, maybe we should. Tone it down a bit." Mrs. Miller glared at him. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. One by one, the relatives began gathering their things, murmuring half-hearted excuses as they shuffled out the door. Natalie looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and relief. "Mom, how do you do? How do you stay so calm?" I smiled softly, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Years of practice, darling, and the understanding that sometimes you have to be louder than the voices trying to silence you." As I left that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Millers weren't the type to back down easily, but neither was I. One way or another, I would make sure my daughter reclaimed her home and her voice. The tension in the room had reached its breaking point, so thick it felt like you could cut it with a knife. Natalie's face was flushed, her hands trembling, but her eyes burned with fury. For the first time, I saw the anger bubbling beneath her usually polite exterior, and I knew that the Millers had pushed her far past the limits of tolerance. Mrs. Miller's shrill voice broke the silence, her words slicing through the air like daggers. "Well, Curtis, I hope you're paying attention. This is the woman you want to marry, disrespectful, spoiled, completely blind to how families work." She jabbed a finger in Natalie's direction, her face twisted in disdain. "I've been right about her from the start. She's not good enough for you. She never has been." Natalie spun around to face her, her voice sharp and steady. "Not good enough? What exactly have I done wrong, Mrs. Miller? Is it wrong to ask that you respect my parents' gift? Is it wrong to want my own home, the one my family gave me to, feel like it belongs to me?" Curtis jumped in, his tone frantic, desperate to defuse the situation. "Natalie, you need to calm down. Apologize to my parents, please. Just let it go." Natalie's sharp gaze turned to him, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "Apologize? For what? For asking them not to trample all over my home? Curtis, if you can't see how ridiculous this is, then maybe you should leave too. Take your parents and go. This is my house and not theirs. Not yours. Mine." Thomas, who had been silent all this time, finally stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. He wasn't the type to raise his voice, but the steel in his tone made everyone stop. "Mr. Miller, Mrs. Miller, I'm going to say this once. This house was bought for Natalie. It's her property, and her name is on every legal document tied to it. That means you don't have any claim over it, regardless of how you feel. If you want to live here, you'll have to do so on her terms. And if that doesn't work for you, then I suggest you pack your things and leave." Mr. Miller's eyes narrowed, his lips curling in mockery. He took a slow drag from his cigarette, exhaling smoke in Thomas's direction as if daring him to react. "Ah, Thomas. City folks really have a way with words, don't they? Always thinking they're better than everyone else. Your daughter's got the same attitude, entitlement, arrogance. You've raised her to think she's untouchable. But let me tell you something, family isn't about paperwork or money. Family is about sharing, about making sacrifices, and your daughter clearly doesn't understand that. Thomas didn't flinch, his gaze unwavering. Family isn't about taking advantage of one another, Mr. Miller. It's about mutual respect, and you've shown none of it since the day you walked into this house. My daughter owes you nothing, not an apology, not her time, not her home. And if you think otherwise, then perhaps it's you who doesn't understand what family truly means. Mr. Miller's composure faltered, his hands tightening into fists. For a moment, I thought he might lash out, but before he could respond, Natalie stepped forward again, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. You say you came here to help, to support me, but all you've done is try to take what doesn't belong to you. You've disrespected my parents, insulted me, and treated this house like it's yours. That's not support, it's greed, and I won't stand for it anymore. Curtis reached for her again, his voice breaking. Natalie, please, don't make this worse. You know how my parents are, they don't mean any harm. Just give them a chance. Natalie yanked her arm away, her eyes blazing. A chance? Curtis, I've given them chances every day since they showed up here uninvited, and what have they done with those chances? They've claimed rooms that aren't theirs, smoked in my home, told me I'm not good enough, and tried to guilt me into giving them everything. I'm done. If you won't stand up for me, then you don't belong here either. Mrs. Miller let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. Ungrateful, spoiled brat. Curtis, you're too good for her. Let her learn what it feels like to be alone. Mr. Miller crushed his cigarette against the kitchen counter, leaving a dark stain on the surface. Come on, Curtis. We don't need this nonsense. Let her have her precious house. She'll regret it soon enough. Curtis hesitated, torn between his family and the woman he claimed to love. His eyes darted between Natalie, his parents, and me, his face pale and strained. But Natalie didn't waver. Go, she said firmly, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. Take your family and go. I don't need you here. I don't need any of you here. As the Millers finally stormed out, their arrogance crumbling, Curtis lingered behind, his voice weak and unsure. Natalie, please don't do this. We can fix this. Just give me time. Give my parents time. Natalie's expression didn't soften. You had time, Curtis. You wasted it. And now, it's too late. He left without another word, the door slamming shut behind him. For a moment, the silence was deafening, but then Natalie collapsed into a chair, her breath shaky, her tears finally falling. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tightly. You were brave, Natalie. You stood your ground. And I'm so proud of you. Thomas joined us, placing a hand on her shoulder. This house is yours, sweetheart. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise. And for the first time since the Millers had arrived, peace settled over the villa. Thomas and I stood side by side, watching the Millers limp away down the driveway, their departure a mix of arrogance and humiliation. The sight of Curtis pale and cowering, pulled along by his mother like a child, should have brought some sense of relief. Yet, my mind churned uneasily. Families like the Millers didn't simply retreat, they schemed. And this wasn't over. That evening, I found Natalie at the dining table, silent and distant. Her hair was pulled back, but strands of it fell loosely, reflection of how exhausted she truly was. She hadn't said much since the confrontation, but it was clear the weight of it all hung heavily on her. I sat across from her, breaking the silence. Natalie, what is it? Did something happen at work? She didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, sliding it across the table. It's Curtis, she said quietly. He emailed me. I frowned, unlocking the phone and scrolling through the message. The email was long, the kind of rambling plea you'd expect from someone desperate to win back what they'd lost. His tone shifted between apology and entitlement, peppered with manipulative phrases that made my stomach churn. Natalie, I didn't mean for things to go so far, one line read. I said what I did because I felt like you were insulting my parents, but I know you didn't mean to. Can't we put this behind us? Think about what we had. You can't throw it all away because of one bad day. My family's just trying to support us, and yeah, maybe they're a little overbearing, but they mean well. Please, Natalie, don't let this end like this. I put the phone down, narrowing my eyes. Didn't mean for things to go so far, I muttered. That boy stood there silent while his father insulted you and your family, and now he thinks he can smooth it over with an email? Natalie leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. It's not just this email. It's the whole thing. This entire relationship, it's been like this from the beginning. I kept making excuses for him, kept telling myself he'd stand up for me eventually. But he never did, and now he expects me to forgive him because he feels guilty? It's pathetic. Her words carried an edge I hadn't heard before, a bitterness that had been growing quietly, waiting for the right moment to surface. I placed a hand over hers, speaking gently. You don't owe him forgiveness, Natalie. You don't owe him anything. If he didn't respect you before, he won't respect you now. And a marriage built on that is no marriage at all. She nodded slowly, her gaze distant. I know, Mom. I know. But I feel so stupid. I should have seen it sooner. I should have ended it before it got this far. Thomas walked in, his presence steady as always. He placed a hand on Natalie's shoulder, squeezing gently. You're not stupid, he said firmly. You gave him a chance because you believed in love. That's not something to be ashamed of. But now you see the truth, and you're strong enough to walk away. That's what matters. Natalie's voice wavered. But they're not going to stop, are they? Curtis, his parents, they're going to keep finding ways to bother us. Thomas and I exchanged a look. He nodded toward me, silently asking me to take the lead. I leaned forward, holding Natalie's gaze. They might try, I admitted, but they don't have any power here. You've already shown them you won't tolerate their behavior, and if Curtis keeps pestering you, we'll handle it. Together. Her expression softened, but her shoulders still carried the weight of uncertainty. He was my first serious relationship, Mom, she whispered. I thought he was the one. I thought I could make it work. My heart ached for her. Despite her sharp resolve during the confrontation, she was still my daughter still, the girl who had grown up dreaming of love and happiness. I reached for her hand again, squeezing it tightly. Natalie, sometimes it takes losing something to realize it was never worth holding on to. You have so much ahead of you, sweetheart. This isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of something better. Later that night, as Thomas and I sat in the living room discussing the fallout, his voice carried a note of frustration. I should have thrown them out the moment they walked in, he muttered. I should have. I interrupted, placing a hand on his arm. You didn't because you wanted Natalie to see for herself what they were, and she did. You did the right thing, Thomas. It's over now. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Over maybe, but I still can't believe the nerve of them acting like they were doing us a favor by moving in. Who does that? I laughed softly, shaking my head. People who don't understand boundaries. People who take instead of give. But they're gone now, and Natalie's free. That's all that matters. As the house settled into quiet, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Natalie's decision to end things with Curtis had been brave-hard but necessary. And while the Millers had tried to claw their way into her life, they had underestimated her strength. She wasn't someone they could walk over, and they had learned that the hard way. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace not just for myself, but for my daughter. She had reclaimed her voice, her home, and her future. And in the glow of the evening light, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Mrs. Miller's shrill accusations echoed through the room, drawing gasps and murmurs from the onlookers. Curtis hunched in the corner, looking more like a timid child than the instigator of this mess. But his parents stood tall, their arrogance practically radiating. As Mrs. Miller puffed up her chest and raised her voice again, I stepped forward, my hand steady on Natalie's back. The moment I entered the spotlight, I saw the flicker of doubt cross Mrs. Miller's face. She remembered exactly what I was capable of, but her pride wouldn't let her retreat. Your daughter owes my son money, and we're here to collect, she declared, her tone sharp and resolute. I tilted my head slightly, narrowing my eyes. Since we're making such a public scene, I said coolly, why don't we clarify exactly how much does she owe you? Mrs. Miller hesitated for half a second, her shoulders stiffening, but then, with exaggerated confidence, she practically shouted, $2,897.36. The room froze, the weight of her ridiculous claim hanging in the air. For a moment, you could hear a pin drop, until laughter erupted from the crowd. Wait, less than $3,000? That's what this whole mess is about? Someone muttered, incredulous. Did she say 36 cents? Who even calculates that? Another chimed in, the mocking tone spreading like wildfire. The whispers turned to outright mockery, and Mrs. Miller's face faltered as she glanced nervously around. Mr. Miller stepped up, desperate to salvage their dignity. He pulled out a giant poster board covered in handwritten expenses, holding it high like some bizarre protest sign. This, he began, his voice booming, is a full breakdown of every expense my son paid for. Her coffee, dinners, flowers, movie tickets. Look at the numbers. He started reading off transactions, his tone absurdly professional, as if presenting a corporate budget report. But the crowd wasn't buying it. Valentine's Day flowers $20? Is that a joke? One voice shouted. Dude, he kept a record of every coffee? That's not budgeting, that's psycho behavior, someone else added, sending another round of laughter through the room. Curtis muttered something under his breath, his face red with embarrassment. I only kept track for financial planning. It wasn't about being petty. If his goal was to defend himself, it backfired spectacularly. The crowd exploded with laughter, the jeers growing louder and louder. I knew this was my moment. Stepping forward, I raised my voice loud and clear, cutting through the chaos. All right, since they're demanding payment, let's do this properly. The room hushed as I pulled out my checkbook with deliberate slowness. Every eye was on me as I wrote a check for $3,000, making sure everyone could see the amount. Then, with a casual flick of my wrist, I tossed the check toward Curtis. It fluttered through the air and landed at his feet. There, I said, my tone razor sharp. Every penny you claim paid in full. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Mrs. Miller lunged for the check, snatching it up like it was a trophy. For a second, she looked victorious until I smiled. Now, Curtis, I drawled, fixing my gaze on him. Since we're settling debts, let's talk about what you owe Natalie. Curtis froze, his face draining of color. He knew exactly what I meant, and the crowd did too. Mrs. Miller shrieked, her voice shrill with desperation. What money? That's nonsense. I let out a cold laugh, meeting her gaze without flinching. Let's go over the numbers, shall we? For Curtis's birthday, my daughter bought him a brand new phone, $1,200. When his father fell ill, I personally brought a gift worth $1,500. I have the receipts right here. I tapped on my phone, pulling up the evidence and holding it up for everyone to see. And these are just the expenses we can verify. That's already more than $2,500, not including all the other everyday costs we haven't accounted for. I turned to the crowd, raising my voice just enough to let it carry. Tell me, everyone, shouldn't he pay that money back? The response was immediate and deafening. Of course he should. That's way more than what they're demanding from her. Talk about hypocrisy. The Millers flinched under the weight of the chorus, their faces pale and stiff. Mrs. Miller, still clinging to whatever scraps of dignity she had left, huffed defiantly. You're making this up, this is slander. But Natalie had had enough. She stepped forward, her patience snapped and her voice sharp and unwavering. If you don't want to acknowledge the truth, fine, she said. Let's take this somewhere else, maybe a court if you're feeling brave. The room fell silent again, the Miller's bravado crumbling completely. Curtis, still frozen, muttered something incoherent, but Natalie didn't even spare him a glance. Get out, she said firmly, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. This is the last time you'll humiliate me. Mrs. Miller grabbed Curtis's arm, dragging him away, her muttered threats lost in the noise of the crowd. As they finally disappeared from sight, Natalie turned to me, her shoulders slumping as the tension began to fade. I wrapped an arm around her, whispering softly, You were incredible, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. And as the crowd dispersed, the whispers fading into the background, I knew that Natalie had reclaimed her voice and her dignity. Mom, she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. What do I do? He's not stopping. He's not letting me move on. I stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. You don't do anything, sweetheart. This isn't your fight anymore. It's his inability to accept reality. But we're not going to let him drag you down with him. She nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to the floor. I just don't understand. Why can't he let go? Why does he keep doing this? I sighed, my voice steady but firm. Because he's not stuck on you, Natalie. He's stuck on his own ego. He can't handle the fact that you walked away, that you chose yourself over him. And now all he knows how to do is lash out. That night, I reached out to my old college friend, a lawyer with a reputation for handling cases like this with precision and professionalism. Within hours, we had drafted a formal legal notice, demanding the removal of the defamatory social media post, and requesting the preservation of the poster's IP information for potential legal action. We also filed a civil harassment report, ensuring there was now an official record of Curtis's behavior. As I sent the documents off, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. Curtis might have thought he could intimidate Natalie into submission, but he had underestimated the strength of the people standing behind her. For a few days, things seemed to quiet down. The social media post was removed, and Natalie began to breathe a little easier. She returned to her routine work, coffee dates with friends, yoga sessions on the weekends. She looked lighter, freer, as though the weight of Curtis's presence was finally lifting from her shoulders. But then, the package arrived. Natalie walked into the house that evening, her expression tense as she placed the box on the kitchen counter. "Mom," she said, her voice tight. "Look at this." I opened the package carefully, pulling out the handwritten letter inside. The tone was dripping with regret, self-blame, and nostalgia. Curtis had written about their first date, the way she smiled, the night she stayed up caring for his sick father. Every line was carefully crafted to tug at her emotions, to remind her of the good moments they had shared. But then, the final sentences revealed the truth. "I can't accept you walking away completely. You know I have nothing left. You were my only light. If you don't come back, I don't know what I might do." I clenched my jaw, my hands tightening around the letter. This wasn't an apology, it was emotional blackmail, a thinly veiled threat designed to manipulate Natalie into feeling responsible for his well-being. I turned to her, my voice calm but resolute. "This ends now, Natalie. He doesn't get to do this to you anymore." She nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "What do we do?" I picked up my phone, dialing my lawyer friend once again. "We escalate," I said simply. By the next morning, we had filed a restraining order against Curtis, ensuring he could no longer contact Natalie directly or indirectly. The legal notice was updated to include the letter, and we made it clear that any further attempts to harass her would result in immediate legal action. Natalie watched as I handled the paperwork, her expression a mix of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Mom," she said softly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You don't have to face this alone, sweetheart. We're in this together." As the days passed, Curtis's presence began to fade. The legal actions had sent a clear message, and he seemed to finally understand that his attempts to manipulate Natalie would no longer be tolerated. She began to rebuild her life piece by piece, her confidence growing with each passing day. And as I watched her thrive, I felt a sense of pride that was impossible to put into words. Natalie had faced the storm head-on, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever. Curtis might have tried to break her, but he had only succeeded in showing her just how powerful she truly was. Curtis stood frozen in the dim light of the parking lot, his face twisted with frustration, defeat, and a flicker of something almost resembling regret. The sight of Natalie, poised and resolute, standing beside Ethan, a man whose calm confidence rendered Curtis powerless, seemed to crush every ounce of his remaining bravado. For a long moment, he remained rooted in place, unable to move, unable to speak. Natalie's gaze didn't waver. She had once been vulnerable under Curtis's scrutiny, bending and sacrificing pieces of herself to accommodate his insecurities. But now, she was unwavering, untouched by his anger. Standing beside Ethan, she embodied strength and certainty, stark contrast to the fragmented man before her. "Curtis," Natalie said, her voice steady and unyielding. "This is the last time I'm going to say this. Walk away. You have no place in my life anymore." Her words hung heavy in the air, each syllable cutting through the tension like a blade. Curtis flinched, his hands clenching at his sides, his breath uneven. "You were mine," he muttered, his voice tinged with bitterness. "You gave up on me, Natalie. You replaced me like I was nothing." Ethan stepped forward, his presence commanding yet calm. His tone was measured, his words deliberate. "She owes you nothing. You had your chance and you lost it. It's time to let go." Curtis blinked, startled by Ethan's intervention. He opened his mouth to retort, but no words came. His fury, his resentment of it seemed to dissipate under the weight of Ethan's steady gaze. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then, Curtis's shoulders sagged, his posture collapsing inward, as though the reality of his defeat had finally sunk in. Without another word, he turned on his heel and disappeared into the shadows of the parking lot, his footsteps heavy and uneven. Natalie exhaled slowly, releasing a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Ethan glanced at her, his expression softening. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm fine. He doesn't have any power over me anymore." Ethan smiled faintly, placing a comforting hand on her arm. "Let's get you home." As they drove away from the parking lot, the city lights reflecting against the car windows, Natalie leaned back in her seat, her mind finally beginning to quiet. Curtis's actions had been the last gasp of a man unwilling to accept reality, but she had faced him head-on, unafraid. She hadn't let his words, his accusations, or his manipulations unsettle her. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. Back at home, Natalie stepped through the front door, greeted by Thomas and me waiting in the living room. The moment we saw her, we knew something had happened, but it wasn't defeat or exhaustion that marked her expression. It was relief. "Curtis showed up," she said simply, her tone steady. Thomas stiffened, his jaw tightening as his gaze sharpened. "What did he do?" "Nothing," Natalie replied, meeting his eyes. "I didn't let him. Ethan didn't let him. He tried to drag me down again, but he failed. He won't be bothering me anymore." I stood, wrapping her in a hug. "That's my girl," I said softly, pride swelling in my chest. She pulled back, her smile faint but genuine. "It's over, Mom. It's finally over." The following weeks marked a new chapter in Natalie's life. The specter of Curtis and his family no longer haunted her, and she embraced the freedom of moving forward without hesitation. Her work flourished, her relationships deepened, and her confidence soared. Ethan, steadfast and supportive, became a quiet presence in her life, not as someone who overshadowed her, but as someone who valued her independence and strength. Their partnership was built not on control or compromise, but on mutual respect and admiration. One evening, as we sat together in the backyard, the soft glow of the patio lights casting shadows across the garden, Natalie turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Mom," she began, her voice tinged with curiosity, "do you ever look back and wonder how things could have turned out differently?" I smiled, placing a hand over hers. "Sometimes. But then I remind myself that the choices we make shape us, even the painful ones. You didn't just survive, Natalie. You grew, and I couldn't be prouder of you." She nodded, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "I don't regret anything. I wish I'd seen the truth sooner." I squeezed her hand gently. "You saw it when you needed to. And now look at you standing tall, unshaken, and ready for whatever comes next." Curtis was devoured by his own selfishness, his arrogance leaving him stranded in a life no longer tied to hers. Fired from his job, abandoned by his reputation, ignored by every resume he sent out, this world had unraveled, and Natalie hadn't needed to lift a finger. I could only imagine him now drained, miserable, pacing back and forth in the shadows of his downfall. But for Natalie, the chapter was closed. The weight had lifted. She had chosen herself, and that choice had shaped her future in ways she couldn't have imagined. At the dinner table later that evening, Natalie turned to me, her voice steady. "Mom, do you ever regret anything? The decisions you've made, the battles you've fought?" I set my cup down gently, meeting her gaze. "No, sweetheart. Everything I've done, every choice I've made, has brought me here to you, to us, to the life we've built, and I couldn't be prouder." She smiled faintly, her eyes shining with quiet understanding. "I guess I don't regret anything either. It was painful, but it showed me the truth, and it helped me grow." I reached across the table, squeezing her hand firmly. "And that's what matters. You didn't just survive, Natalie. You thrived, and now you're free." As we sat in the quiet of the evening, the past felt like nothing more than a distant memoria. Chapter closed, a lesson learned, a victory hard won. Natalie had reclaimed her life, her voice, her future. And as her mother, I couldn't have been prouder to witness her transformation. Ellie Mineral was no longer just a mother who gave gifts. She was the woman who gave her daughter the strength to claim her place in the world, and that was the most meaningful gift of all.